Right.
With that said, if you go back to the 60s and we take a case like Zamora's with the Tic Tac looking thing that almost whatever that was flying the way it did, if people want to go read about that, they can and make up their own explanation. But then there's others from the 60s where or in the 70s, and if the reports are correct and they were reported accurately, whatever was seen by people was at the time defying the laws of physics in at least a handful of cases. And again, this is back to what you and I were saying earlier. This is like 5%, maybe even less than that, maybe 1% of all of the stories over the last 100 years. But if you force me to come up with an explanation, I would say there's probably definitely been sightings of U.S. technology at some point, right? There's definitely, to the point about the drone swarms from 2 years ago. I'm sure there's been sightings of foreign technology, but it's hard for me to attribute all of the past really incredible sightings, like the ones that happened close to where I grew up in Dexter, Michigan, that got then Congressman Gerald Ford involved in 1966. Those were just, I could spend an hour talking about what people, like dozens of sheriff's deputies, corroborated seeing. The thing appeared at one end of a swamp and then allegedly, shifted behind them, like split in a split second. Who knows? Like, I
didn't know you were from there. That was the incident that both destroyed J. Allen Hynek's credibility and also basically changed his mind and made him decide privately that it was a real phenomenon.
And I had, according to my dad, family members who saw some of the things in the sky that dozens, hundreds of people were seeing over the course of like a month between Ann Arbor, Dexter, and Hillsdale. And then there's the sightings and the girls at Hillsdale College at the time. And so what I'm getting at is like, I remain fairly agnostic as to what the answer is, because to me, it's more fascinating for me to leave it at, I know this is less interesting to a lot of people, but like for me, it's a lot more fascinating to stay open-ended and be like, maybe, because obviously people are like, oh, they can't fly, from a nearby galaxy the conventional way. It wouldn't happen. Who knows? Like if it's an advanced civilization, if we're considering every possibility, who knows? That's always a possibility, but then maybe it's not as likely. Then you've got people like Jacques Vallée that have the interdimensional hypothesis. There's a lot of interesting theories surrounding that one. I've always been a fan of that one, just as on a personal level. It's just interesting to me. But also, it does come down to, you've got stuff like the Phoenix Lights incident. What was that? Like, it was seemingly a craft the size of the entire Phoenix metropolitan area. And thousands of people saw it. The then governor lied about seeing it and then said later on that he did see it. And now is a big advocate for transparency on the subject. So, the answer to your question is as much as I wish I could give you a more direct answer, is it could be a lot of things. And the one thing I am confident in saying is that I don't think anybody who's trying to give it one solid explanation is necessarily looking at all of the data points we've had over the last 100 years.
I get back, and you're absolutely right in that sense too. I get back to the thing. I think it's all of the above. But the thing I have to tell you, the thing I don't buy that is people say, well, there's no technology that can exist to make you fly faster than the speed of light. Because Jacob,
we would know.
We've only had electricity for 150 years. We've only had the iPhone for less than 20 years. There's supposedly the people who say they've talked to these people, I'll call them people, say that the gray aliens from Zeta Reticuli are 2 million years ahead of us. If you extrapolate even 100 years, I'm predicting that we as a civilization, I won't live to see it, will fly faster than the speed of light before the end of the century. I think that's going to happen. First of all, we already know how to do it. It's just a matter of energy.
Because it works within. I'm not a physics guy, but I believe it's within the quantum paradigm specifically. But like, it's just a matter of moving space around you. If I'm not butchering the explanation, but then also to your point, like I studied this is related to my work, but also, kind of separate. I studied philosophy in college, and one of my favorite works was the Thomas Kuhn, who came up with the whole concept of the paradigm shift. I think his book was A History of Scientific Revolutions. But yeah, literally, it was just like pointing out how much our entire understanding of physics like drastically changes with each paradigm shift. I mean, even just from Newtonian physics into relativity theory and quantum mechanics, the shift was massive. If you go back 1,000 years, it's not even like we couldn't even wrap our heads around it from a personal level. So yeah, you make a really good point.
And I also need to point out, speaking of that, Richard Dolan has brought this up, and I've talked about this too, about the fact that, all right, so if the government has this technology, if we either re-engineer or reverse engineered it, or we've actually come up with it on our own, and they aren't sharing it with the public, specifically energy generation, I mean, supposedly it would take more electricity to fly a little two-speeder spacecraft faster than the speed of light than all the electricity currently generated on Earth, supposedly. So if you can generate that sort of power and you're not sharing it with the public, that's a huge, enormous crime. That's a moral crime, and he thinks that's the case, and I think he might be onto something too,
I've heard a lot of people talk about that and bring up that point that if that's what they were doing, that would be just, unconscionable to consider. We're dealing with the energy crises that we are. And that's always been the question I've had about, like, if all of this stuff is just human technology, right? Like every story we've had, like all of the examples I've brought up so far on the show. So, today, like if all of those are just US or some other adversary's technology, that brings up the question you just mentioned too. But then also, like, is this just a matter, like, to my point about scientific paradigms and paradigm shifts, why haven't we had a paradigm shift in physics for the last 100 years or so? Like, that's a separate question, but it brings back to that point, because like a lot of people way smarter than I am in the natural sciences have talked about this for the longest time, of how like we kind of expected there to be a new paradigm after that would either like unify relativity and quantum mechanics, or create a new theory that rectifies the anomalies that kind of in each that are not solved yet. And a lot of people have been wondering, like, where is it? Like, why haven't we reached that point? Now, in all fairness, I'm not a physicist, so there might be prosaic explanations to that question. But I have seen other people, debate, like, if the government was going to, theoretically speaking, if they had access to some new propulsion technology or some new energy producing tech, right? That would require them hiding it from the wider scientific community, and it would also require them having a degree of influence over the people in the current scientific community. And obviously, I don't want to get into weird, theories and whatnot, but like from my understanding, like one of the leading researchers into anti-gravity work I think it was in the 90s. I'll have to look into this again, but there was one of the scientists who had one of the most promising hypotheses on how to actually develop anti-gravity and scale it, right? She was able to come up with a theory to do it at such a minute scale. The question beyond that would be, okay, how do you scale it up to like more weight, essentially? Mm-hmm. And my understanding is after she published that paper, she disappeared. And there was, she was from China initially.
Yeah, right. I've heard this.
Yeah, and I think people believe she went back to China. And that she's likely still alive, but that she could be working for the Chinese government now. And so if that, again, that might not have happened, like it's been reported, it's a story that's out there, but I'm saying theoretically speaking, it would take something like that, I imagine, if the US government had access to stuff like this, they very well likely might have, scientists that are working for them that are doing work that they might not be doing at like at a university. but who knows? It's definitely something interesting to think about.
Well, you also write about AI, and if you're just talking about the Chinese, this came up in the news today, and let's end with this about the fact that the Chinese supposedly have an AI model now that is actually clearly superior to anything the Americans have commercially developed. And first of all, is that true? And my other question is, knowing them, how did they do that? Because they're not good at inventing stuff. They aren't. It's literally, I mean, it's their culture. And I have a hard time buying this. So can you tell me about this, or?